Ah yes, the F-4S, the American muscle car of the sky. You either love it or you hate it. And I mean, with how spammed out this thing is, I wouldn't blame ya. If I had $1 for every 11.0 to 12.0 game that didn't have an F-4S in it, I would have $0 because these things are in every single game. But hey, is this just because it's the only Rank 7 fighter premium that the US has access to? Or is this genuinely a good plane that you should pick up? Let's find that out. The first thing I want to cover is the radar and weapon systems, as it's the most integral part of this plane. At 11.3, you have access to a first-generation pulse Doppler radar, letting you see your enemies against the ground clutter. And along with it comes a helmet-mounted display. This is a really strong system that not very many aircraft have access to. Off the top of my head, only the late Navy Phantoms, some of the late Russian aircraft, and the JAF have access to this system. With a helmet-mounted display, you can look and point your radar and weapons around before your plane has even moved. It's a really nice system for quality of life fighting against other aircraft, but in something as heavy and unmaneuverable as the F-4 Phantom, it can make and break certain engagements, as you live and die by what your missiles can do most of the time. And being able to point your missiles around without actually moving your plane can be the difference between winning a fight or turning into a fireball. Keep in mind though, this is a first-generation pulse Doppler radar, so it's going to struggle at times to lock things that later aircraft might be able to. But hey, what good's a radar if not for the missile it's guiding in? The F-4S has access to the AIM-7F Sparrow, which is the top radar missile that the United States has access to, and honestly, it's the gold standard. It pulls hard, it maneuvers straight off of the rail, and it has a really good range if you do have to take longer shots. And at 25 Gs of pull, this thing is unavoidable outside of niche scenarios or bad missile shots. There really are only two other missiles that outperform it in the radar department. That would be the Skyflash Super Temp, which is only found on the Interceptor Tornadoes, which are pretty sad aircraft, and the R-27ER, which happens to be attached to debatably one of, if not the best aircraft in the game, the MiG-29. Aside from those two specific aircraft though, you really have some of the best jousting capabilities in the game with this missile. The only problem with this missile is that it's so good and widespread across other types of aircraft that you're going to be jousting against other AIM-7Fs. As a secondary missile, you have access to the AIM-9H Sidewinder. It's not necessarily the greatest missile in the world, boasting only 18 Gs of pull, but with how much range it has, it is more than enough to get the job done. As long as you're not taking crazy, high-turn dogfight missile shots with these things, they're going to start becoming a lot more reliable of a missile that you have access to. But when you are in a situation where you really need a gun to get the kill, that's where the F-4S is going to let you down. You have access to the 20mm Colt gun pod, which Colts already are known for their low damage, but when you put it in a gun pod where it's alternating barrels one at a time, you're going to be doing basically nothing but tickling the enemy. I'm pretty sure the only gun kills I got while I was playing this thing were pilot snipes. It got to the point where I started not taking the gun pod into certain matches just so that I could get better missile kills. That being said though, I don't recommend it. You're really playing with your pants down if you get caught in close quarters at all. And for the average player, just adding a little bit of extra weight so that you can have a gun is going to be way better than any performance bonuses that you'll get by flying clean. Though you guys did see in the intro clip, there are more ways than just guns to get a close quarters kill. Overall, the weapons kit that this thing has access to is definitely one of the biggest strengths of this plane. Carrying 8 above average missiles is a pretty good kit, and even if the gun is unreliable, it has a lot of ammo, so you can really just mag dump your enemies. If you were looking for a light and nimble premium to play, oh boy, you chose the wrong plane. When I called this thing a muscle car, I mean it's really like a one-to-one direct translation. You're not going to be whipping around, turning left and right, but hey, you have more than enough engine power to make up for it. I mean damn, for certain speeds, this thing has a better thrust-to-weight ratio than the F-14. You know, just the aircraft that directly preceded it and was an upgrade in basically every way. And this goes for both the F-14A and the F-14B. You have a better thrust to weight than the F-14A at low speeds, and a better thrust to weight than the F-14B at high speeds. That being said, thrust to weight isn't everything. The F-14s still have competitive speeds and accelerations to you because of their improved lift-to-drag ratio, which is the brother to thrust to weight, and basically equally as important, though most people forget about it when talking about flight performance. But let's be honest, this plane looks like a brick. Did anybody expect it to fly like anything but a brick? But if worse comes to worse, the F-4S is an F-4J modified with slats. They were installed with the purpose of delaying stalls, which in practice means that you can pull higher angles of attack and actually whip inside of some people at high speeds. This isn't reliable by any means, but as a last resort, if you do need to go close quarters with somebody, you need to try and outplay them in the first 1 to 2 turns. Otherwise, once you get to low speed, you'll be producing basically no lift and falling out of the sky, just giving yourself to the enemy to shoot you. Also, despite the large amounts of thrust that this plane produces, when you take the gun pod and a full load of missiles, this thing is pretty draggy. On the deck, you're not necessarily going to be that fast. Sure, you'll maybe outrun something like a MiG-21, but outside of that, there are a lot of planes in the Matchmaker now that can catch up to you. And while this issue does solve itself by climbing, climbing in 2023 is a death sentence if you don't know exactly what you're doing and have a strong game plan from the start. The biggest thing I dislike about this plane, though, is that the flares eject upwards, which makes it very difficult for a plane that doesn't turn very hard to get out of the way of its own flares when it's trying to dodge a missile so that it goes for the flares instead of you. It happens every once in a while, and it's kind of annoying, but it doesn't break the plane. It's just, you have to be aware of it. So do I recommend the F-4S? Well, I don't really recommend spending $70 on a virtual plane regardless, but if $70 doesn't mean much to you, this plane's kind of a mixed bag. I think more experienced players are going to do better in it, as this plane relies a lot more on positioning and spatial awareness than something like the MiG-23 might. Unless you're one of those people who exclusively bombs, then sure I guess, but I personally don't enjoy spending $70 to fly in a straight line. It can be a pretty consistent grinder though. You can get 2 to 3 kills per game as long as you have good spatial awareness. But as a newer player, if you really do want to pick it up, don't feel bad for going 1-to-1. F4 Phantoms aren't the most intuitive planes to play, and the Matchmaker has become a lot less forgiving with the introduction of 4th generation fighters. Ultimately, it is up to you to decide how much $70 is worth to you, but out of all of the top tier premiums, this one is definitely one of the best ones. That's all for this video. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.